Our next guest is a professor at the SCARP Planning School at UBC. When I learned she was already using Alain's material in her class, I immediately asked her to speak at an urban lunch. She told me the timing would make it very difficult for her, but I insisted. I learned just how committed she was to her profession when she logged on to our urban lunch and gave her presentation by a Greek waterfront while preparing for her wedding. Amazing. In her research, she uncovers innovative data for the study of housing, mobility, and marginalization. Please welcome Professor Julia Harten.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me. What a great event. I decided for today I was going to talk about teaching, as I now learned one of many educators among the speakers. But I thought I would report back from the classroom where future planners are being trained. So I'm going to talk about a class that I just designed. Actually, I was hired to design, so I started my position last year, and I was asked to design a brand new course on real estate and planning. And why I decided to talk about this today is because I designed this course very much, I think, in the spirit of Alain Bertaud's work, which I've been reading since grad school and greatly admire. So just to give you some general context, I think the spirit or the sentiments that he describes, planners being generally skeptical of economists, is very much alive in the classroom. So I did encounter that, I do encounter that. I just started teaching the class again last week. But there's also a general curiosity about the economics of city and a real eagerness to understand. In this case, my class is about real estate development in particular. How do real estate developers look at cities? How do they approach space? What is an economics of space, of urban space? And so, there is this understanding, which I think is fundamental to Alain Bertaud's book, which is to understand markets, to interact with markets, to regulate markets. We first need to understand markets as planners. And so in the first class of this course that I taught just last Thursday, we read about different ways that the literature has kind of theorized the relationship between planners and real estate developers. And to set the stage, perhaps, if you like, I let my students read the introductory chapter of Alain Bertaud's book, which basically lays out what planners know well, which are cities, relationships in cities, social processes, culture, the importance of place, and what economists know well, which is land markets, migration in cities as labor markets. And then with that in mind, I let them read some more contradicting thoughts about real estate development and planning, which is a famous article by Richard Pisa titled "Who Builds America?", which basically reminds planners that a lot of the decision as to what gets built is not made by planners, it's made by real estate developers. So a big incentive to actually try to work with them. But then I also let them read some literature that is more critical of an economics perspective on cities. In particular, some work by a historian who traces back the relationship between property rights, value of land, value of labor, and racism to the Jim Crow area, and kind of lets us follow his tracing the continuity of those relationships until the present day. And then I also let them read a piece by Sarah Safransky with a contemporary example of some of these continued institutions being relevant today. So that's a piece on Detroit, where one of the examples that she draws on is a white property developer getting permits to redevelop a vacant piece of land, which actually is not vacant at all, but has been used by low-income and people of color community members for years. Unfortunately, their labor and use was not recognized. So all that to say that in designing this course and training future urban planners in how they might approach real estate development, real estate developers, I built the whole course very much around, I think, the spirit of Alain Bertaud's work, which is that planners can learn a lot from economists. But I also emphasize, and maybe that's a somewhat different perspective that I bring to you here tonight, I also emphasize that there is risk in being too market-driven and believing perhaps too much in the power of markets. As an academic, I would distinguish between economics and capitalism, but we live in a capitalistic society, and a society that places a lot of value on numbers, on markets, on money. Right? And so I still teach that in that situation, in the circumstances that we're in, there's a clear job description for planners to negotiate for better welfare for all, which often translates into advocating for those that are marginalized. And yeah, that's all I have today for you. Thank you very much.